Chivalry is not dead.
Amen to that.
Not yet. Oh, how you doing? Good.
I'm Ashley. I'm Ashley. Nice to meet you.
What are you doing back over here? You're supposed to be in Detroit.
How you doing, sir?
I thought you went to Detroit or something. I don't know.
It's fun how the little town
Oh, I get you.
he knows the truth. You always go to him.
I knew nothing. He claims nothing. See nothing, know nothing.
Oh, yeah.
Sergeant Schultz. Just text me. I'm on my way. Cool. I'm guessing he means from home.
Well, we know what that means.
Hopefully not from work. Oh, he's at home.
Awesome.
Nope, he's right around the corner.
Good, good, good.
I was in a board meeting in Getty a couple weeks ago, and they have chairs kind of like this, and I went to put my foot back, and I hit that button, and all of a sudden I was like,
Oh, I do that also. That's the way I sit most of the time in my office chair, and it's just all the time. I just
they're
jump.
like, where'd you go?
When you do it real well, you can drop it and put your foot underneath it.
Yeah, that's what I did.
And then you're stuck, and then that's even more graceful.
Good day at work.
I felt very,
Long day at
Do our
work.
homework on it.
Hear that?
Not bad, but I didn't write anything down, so it's like.
for 20 seconds.
Businesses
Yeah.
benefit. We don't want like paint shops and body shops.
I'm much closer than that. Hey, I've been running all day. Might as well run a couple more seconds to get here. Right?
Businesses that produce
Get that 10,000 steps in.
We don't want that because then people are like, well, I can't run on the trail. I want businesses that sell ice cream and hot dogs because I'm fat. That will make me walk down the trail.
All right, I show the clock to be 7 o'clock, so we'll call this meeting to order. If we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, Mr. Bray.
Here.
Mrs. Brimmer.
Here?
Mr. Conley.
Here.
Mr. Hall and Mr. McGrath are both excused this evening. Mr. Nixon.
Here.
Harrison Owens.
Here.
Mr. Watson.
Here.
Craig Owens is here. We've got the full bevy of the brightest minds in City Hall here to help us out today. Tim Johnson, Shandell, Rebecca, Mr. Womack, got the whole crew. Okay, folks, if we can take a look at the minutes from our February 4, 2020 meeting, and need a motion to approve those minutes, please.
I'll make that motion.
A second.
A motion and support for that. Anything that anybody sees we need to adjust on there? Okay, seeing none, all in favor of approving those minutes, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries, thank you. Our agenda for this evening, I'll make the motion that we approve the agenda as it's been presented to us.
Seconded.
Anybody see anything we need to tweak? Add, change, delete? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries, thank you. Public comments, we would love to be able to hear from you. If you would like to address us, you can step up here to the podium. If you would give us your name and address for the clerk to record, and Also, please keep your comments to 4 minutes. So the podium is yours if you would like to make use of it. Okay, seeing none, we will close the public comments. Commissioners, any conflicts of interest or ex parte communication that needs to be reported by you this evening? Okay, seeing none. We'll move to our public hearings for this evening. I will open the public hearing to consider the request for rezoning at 112 West Muskegon. The request is to rezone from R1 to B3. In your packet, in your that you have, it's page 9 is where the documentation on that public hearing starts, if you need to refer to that. But that public hearing is now open. Mr. Womack, I think we addressed this a little bit last time on some of our other stuff. Anything specific that you need to update us on?
No, so the history of this property was there formerly was a single-family residential on that property. It has since been torn down. I do not believe that this property meets the minimum lot size requirements for the B3 district. And frankly, I don't think it would fit a business there anyways. Now, the person making the request is the owner of the adjacent piece of property, Roland's Warehouse. And in my discussions with them, they've indicated to me a future desire to turn that possibly to a parking lot area. So that, I believe, is what their intent is. Now, I think one of the planning commission members did indicate to me that in our rule book, we cannot require anything specific of them to get a rezoning of this property. But it might be a wise idea in the future that if this property owner were ever to want to develop a parking lot on this property, that they be forced to combine that property with the bigger property. And I did detail in an email to the board some of my thoughts regarding that, such as having an exit out on the 3rd Street, probably not a great idea. Have some kind of screening for headlights so that they don't go into residential houses on the opposite side of the street. But those are all issues we can handle as part of the site plan review process. So I don't personally have any objections to this request. Mr. Johnson, any thoughts?
I think you're correct on the fact that as part of a rezoning, you can't require any conditions. Those could be imposed when a site plan is brought before you.
Right. Any public comments on this? If you would like to, again, please step up to the podium and give us your name and address. And
Yeah, I'm Jim Rowland. I own the property at 112 and 130 West Muskegon Street. When I purchased the property, I basically have done what I intended to do at this point, is to clean up the blight and get it back in shape. And since then, you guys have rezoned my property. So I want to marry that into my current new zoning and make the actual description of the property the same as my business property. I want to join it all together and make one parcel, one description. So in terms of, do I have any particular plans? No, I don't. I don't know if it's going to be a parking lot. I don't know if it's going to be a flower garden with a water fountain. I don't know what it's going to be. But I want to get it all together, get all the loose ends taken care of, and so it's ready and it's done. And if sometime I do decide to do something, then I'm able to do it. Pretty simple.
yeah. Thank you.
Questions? We'll be good stewards of the property. We've been in town doing business for 70 years, and I think that we do a fairly decent job. That's all I got.
Any other comments on this zoning request?
Mark Laws, 54 South First Street. I just want to say I appreciate everything the Rollins and their family do for the community. So, and I appreciate all you guys do serving on the committee too. So,
Any other comments on this one? All right, seeing none, we will close the public hearing, and that's our only scheduled public hearing for this evening. So if we move to item 9, new business, we can just take up the this request for the zoning from R1 to B3 at 112 West Muskegon.
I'll make the motion to recommend to City Council to approve 112 West Muskegon rezoning request from R1 to B3.
Okay.
I'll second that.
We have motion, we have support. Any discussion on that?
I have one question. Is it possible to have that one made to one parcel? Is that, I don't know if that's even an option. Is that something that we can recommend, or?
It's a separate process.
Right, but is that something that we can recommend happen?
Well, as Mr. Johnson and I indicated, you can't make it a part of the rezoning. The process would be that this board makes a recommendation to City Council, then City Council takes it independently of anything else. And then at some point in the future, if the property owner wants to do something with it, we can then make it the requirement at that point.
Questions, comments? Okay, we have a motion and support to approve that rezoning request from R1 to B3. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you. Turning to page 15 in your packet, item B under new business, we have a request as well for property change at 141 South Main.
Mm-hmm.
That one. So, got some history on here, which Mr. Johnson laid out in his memo going back there to 2009 and bringing us forward. Mr. Johnson, you one spot in your memo here, you said the request before the Planning Commission pertains to the change of use and the need for on-site parking, not the possible land split. So we're not talking about the land split. We're just talking about the use of the property. Correct?
Correct.
Okay. I know part of that is you indicated some things that we need to clarify as far before we can even, I guess, begin to find out parking spaces available and that sort of thing. So you want to just walk the councilors through that?
Sure. Glad to do that. You have a request this evening from Bob and Betty Truesdale, owners of property at 141 South Main Street. As you know, there's currently 2 buildings on that property. You have the residence, which is occupied by the Truesdales, and the former Amish warehouse furniture store on the front that fronts on Main Street. And there's 2 buildings on the property. I've given you a history of how that occurred, and now the reason this project is being brought before you this evening is that our ordinance requires that if there's a change of use for an existing commercial property, that if more parking spaces are required, then the Planning Commission has the option or the authority to approve that site plan for that change of use. Given the history of this project, whereas in 2009, when it was established, the Planning Commission at that time determined that there would be no on-site parking required for that use except for the house. And the parking would be taken care of by the parking spaces that would be on the street in front of the building on Church Street. So the Truesdales have submitted a request to change the use of the property from the furniture store to what I would call a counseling clinic. And in my report, that would be operated by Transition Counseling Services. So one piece of information we don't have and we hope to get tonight is the number of off-street parking spaces that would be required for that particular use. For that type of use, which would be considered a clinic, 3 parking spaces for each doctor or professional would be required, and one for each employee. And those would be off-street parking requirements. So there really isn't any room for any off-street parking, as you know. So you're being asked then to approve any off-street parking for the counseling service, keeping in mind that the Planning Commission in 2009 said there is no need for on-street park or for off-street parking. You're basically being asked the same question by the Truesdales. Can we change the use to this counseling clinic and still maintain the on-street parking that we have in front of our property right now? So I think the main question is how many people are working in the building. Once we figure out that number, we can come up with how many off-street parking spaces are needed. You can then say, well, if you need 5 or 3, then you can continue to use the on-street parking. So that's really the question. The Truesdales were denied a lot split request earlier this year by our city assessor. So that really isn't the issue before you tonight. The Truesdales have the right to lease that building for any permitted use in our zoning ordinance, provided they meet the parking requirements. So that's really the question before you tonight, is to basically approve the parking requirements for this, what I call counseling clinic. So the applicants are in the audience tonight, and I would ask them to make a presentation of their request and find out how many people or employees would be in the proposed retail building. Do you have any questions for me?
I do. I thought that they had intended to sell the building.
That may be their intent. We don't control the sale or the lease of property, but typically if you're going to sell a piece of property, you have to have title to it. And if they want to split the building off and sell it, the city may have to approve the lot split. We have not done so. So their intentions are just that, their intentions.
Okay, I don't know how we can address this without addressing the lot itself. Because a special approval says shall not be granted for the conversion of a parcel from non-residential to residential. That property is considered commercial at this point. So I'm not sure that whether we're getting into something that is going to cause more problems even in the future.
I take your point there, but I would say that because there's 2 uses on the property that were sanctioned by the city back in 2009, the city approved a special use permit for the house so it can function as a house, and they also approved use of the retail building for a permitted use in that zone. So they're not converting a residential use to a commercial use. They're only changing one commercial use to another for that retail part of the property. Does that answer your question? Doesn't look like it.
So they can leave the property exactly the way it is and lease the building out,
Correct.
but rent to own.
How they manage it between themselves and a potential user is entirely up to them.
Okay.
Anything else?
I just think this is going to come before us again, and it's going to be a problem.
It might. Lot splits are an administrative matter. They're not typically, Planning Commission isn't typically brought into that. I realize it was back in October, where we were looking for some indication of how the Planning Commission might interpret a section of the ordinance. But if they apply for a lot split and it meets the zoning requirements, then they would be granted the lot split. The Planning Commission would not be involved in that. Any other questions?
Talking about the parking, we're only discussing the 3 parking spots that are in front of the business, not in front of the house, correct?
The ordinance requires 2 parking spaces for the house. They have 2 in the garage and in the driveway. So the residence meets the parking requirements for the house.
Right, but they also have extra parking there that was supposed to help the business. does that go with the business, or do we not even look at that?
The on-site parking on the north side of the street is in play. That's what the Planning Commission in 2009 said. Those parking spaces satisfy the parking requirements for the retail building.
Okay.
Now, one other point, I'm glad you brought that up. On the south side of Church Street, that area is not paved. It is gravel and grass, and Mr. Womack provided me with a city ordinance that I did not have at the time I wrote that memo, and that ordinance basically says that parking on grass within the right-of-way is prohibited by that particular ordinance. So they could not use that parking. You could not approve parking on the south side of Church Street to provide parking for the retail use. If somebody parks there, that's basically a violation of the city ordinance.
Mr. Johnson, if I could jump in for a second, and Ms. Knudsen, maybe let me lead you to the future where I think you were going on this. So in this primer, I think you're going in the same place. So in the future, if these properties were to be split, and this board approves of a planning, a parking plan that includes parking in front of the residential building and not just the ones in front of the commercial building, what would happen to the business now having lost the additional 6 parking spots that are currently in front of the residential building? Because those would now be on a separate parcel, potentially owned by somebody else.
Well, it's still on-street parking, and the fact that it's in front of somebody's house doesn't prohibit me from parking in front of their house if it's in the public right-of-way. Anybody can park there.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
Okay. We'll be right here if you have any other questions.
All right, Mr. and Mrs. Truesdale, Ms. Pabst here too. If maybe you guys can step up here, and we obviously need you to fill in the blanks a little bit for us here. So I think one of the things that we need to know that Mr. Johnson was asking about is the number of counselors and employees that you'll have in the building.
Okay. You want Sue to start?
Yeah, let's.
Hi, my name is Sue Ellen Pabst. I'm from Greenville. My address is 1504 Como. I already own one practice called Transitions Counseling Services in Greenville, where we have I have 8 contracted therapists. They're not my employees, they're all their own business. And that's in Greenville. And that, because we've been getting a lot of clients from this area and northwest of here, we saw the need to maybe look at coming to Cedar Springs. And also because I have a clinician that wants to work in her own hometown, and that's Tracy. So currently I have 6 people that I am contracted, that have contracted with me to work out of this location. I have, I was made aware of the parking issue, and so I do have a letter from the VFW who would grant us 6 to 8 parking spots. Also on that Beach Street, on both north and the south side of Main Street, there are over 23 parking spaces. My husband is currently at the Methodist Church meeting to see about them allotting us a few spaces at their place. And we still have an email out to the manager of the mall. Even in Greenville, our parking lot is not enough for our clinicians and the clients. And so our clinicians do park in another lot. And so they would be not parking on site. Those will always be reserved for the clients. Does that? Yes.
Yes, sir.
When you say you have, I'm sorry, could you, I wrote down several things. How many clinicians would you have on site at a time? How is that? Would typically all of them be there at one time?
Not necessarily, because every clinician gets to set their own hours. So depending upon the type of clinical work they're doing. So for example, I've got one clinician who's going to be working with couples and families, and so that's usually evening time. And other clinicians who will be working with children, and that's after school.
Without knowing how the space would be allocated inside of there, what kind of space would there be within the building that would dictate how many clinicians you could have working at any given time? What would be the maximum number that could be working out of that space at the same time, would you estimate?
Are you asking how many offices could I put in there?
I don't know the exact nature of your business, so I don't know.
I'm making little living rooms.
Yeah, okay, so how many spaces would you anticipate being in there? Because that would help us determine
Right.
how many potential employees you'd have on any given time versus how many patients.
Certainly. I would estimate that probably about 10. I don't know that yet.
Okay.
I know that right now I have 6, and I won't bring on more until they're pretty full. So it's going to depend on the demand of the community. Yes,
You said 10 offices,
right.
so you're going to be utilizing the basement also?
Possibly, yes, yes. Just to be prepared, so, you know, we'll probably put a conference room in the basement. You know, if somebody wanted to start a yoga we're about healthy living. And so whatever is related to that, we would have an interest in. But first there has to be the need. So this is where I start, is with 6. Do you need this letter?
You can give that to the clerk, please. Any other questions for Ms. Pabst? Ms. Truesdale?
Okay. I'm Betty Truesdale, 141 South Main. I think I know a couple of you, but not most of you. As you all know, Bob and I moved into Cedar Springs about 10 years ago. We had a home on 14 Mile Road at that point in time, but it was like 2.5 acres that we mowed and a lot of upkeep, and it was getting to be an awful lot of work for us. So one Sunday afternoon, we were driving down Main Street, and the corner of Church and Main, a sign had just come up on the property. It was empty at that time, had been a dental office there for at least 50 years. And the house had burned, and the lot was cleared, and it was ready to be sold. So I said to Bob as we drove by, you know, we had been in business on 14 Mile Road for many years and had closed at the downturn. And really, I miss the Amish warehouse an awful lot. Let's buy that lot and build a store there. Well, as things progressed, Bob, of course, was born and raised in Cedar Springs. He's 87. I married him 66 years ago, so I call this home. It's really our home. So we decided if we could get all of the permission that we needed to build a building for the retail store and a home site, that we really wanted to move back into Cedar Springs. We had lived here right on the corner where Harley and Thelma Morris lived. They had purchased that home from us. We had lived there when our children were young. Other than that, we've always lived out in the country, and we really felt we wanted to move back in. We made all of the applications, got all of the variances. Everybody was so kind to work with, and we were given permission to build the house and the storefront on the same site. In Mr. Johnson's site plan review dated June of 17, he had stated that a method to allow the use of the retail building to be split, it could be split because it's in the B2 zone, and there are no setbacks or lot requirements in B2. Of course, now that has changed, and if we do get permission to split it, it would have to come up to the R1, I believe it is, measurements, which we cannot do on that lot. Regarding the the parking, we had received a letter from LSL Planning. To me, it says that the parking goes with the site, not with the owner. And you should have read that, it's in your packet. I don't think the parking is gonna be a problem. There are 6 spots in front, which is city property, which we paved and striped. So I don't really think that's going to be a problem for Sue, especially with the VFW now giving her permission to park there. And possibly when she hears back from the people across the street at the mall, they'll have additional parking. Our major concern, and we had understood the split was also on tonight's agenda, but when we got Mr. Johnson's letter, he said it was not on the agenda. So I thought both issues were going to be discussed this evening. Our major concern is splitting the property. I talked with Sue quite a while before the meeting tonight, and she is willing to lease if she cannot buy, so we still need that change of use regardless of what happens with a split. Okay? And then Bob he's the technical person, so he has a few things here to say.
Bob Truesdale, or what's left of me, 141 South Main Street. I think there were some questions asked by the city manager as far as utilities, this type of thing, splitting the property. The electric is metered separately to the 2 buildings. Also, the gas, the only thing that would need to be changed is the manifold in the lower level of the store in order to the water be metered separately to the house from the store. Of course, we alluded to the fact that we have a buyer for the store, but I also wanted to make mention another thing for your consideration, that we have a prospective buyer for the adjoining residence, a name that is familiar to a lot of you folks, John and Kathy Rogaleski. They lived here at one time. They now have a home on Big Star Lake, but are nearing the retirement age and are looking forward to coming back to Cedar Springs. And they made an offer on our home, which we would accept. And I think they see it as an ideal setting for them. Very little maintenance, very small yard to mow. And they are, of course, very much aware that there will be people coming and going from a professional building next door and cars parked in the street. I guess I could only guess that maybe their desire is to become people watchers, sit on the front porch in the swing and watch the rest of the world go by. In closing, Kathy, you voiced some very questions that I had in mind, because really this is such a unique situation. Is if it were not broken away, or if it's broken away, what terminology do we have? What do we call the residence? In other words, if it can't be broken, I'd like someone to answer what happens if it stays at one piece. Does that mean that the residence is eligible for a commercial office also, which I could see would very much impact the parking and the traffic on the street and so on and so forth. So I guess I'm just wondering, we have a buyer for both. Seems like an ideal situation. As Betty mentioned, we've been married 66 years. And when you get to be my age, you think about, what's gonna happen. I'm certainly gonna go before she does. And my interest tonight is really trying to get something finalized so that she doesn't have this to go through after I'm gone. I hope I'm not going tomorrow or next week, but it is gonna happen. And I just don't want to leave her in the mess that either, was created 10 or 11 years ago by the city when they accepted us with open arms, and it was exciting to see a new store building go up on South Main Street. And I don't think really that things have changed too much. I think that there's a workable plan, and you have it within your power to decide where we should go on this. I'm open to suggestions. Thank you so much for your consideration.
Yes, ma'am.
Section 4577, which I referred to before, was passed by the city council the same day that the special land use was afforded your property. And
I'm sorry, Kathy, I lost my hearing aids in Florida at Thanksgiving time, so can you run that past me again?
Section 4577 that I referred to earlier, that a special approval shall not be granted for the conversion of a parcel from non-residential to residential. And that was passed the same day that the special land use was afforded that piece of property. And it appears that they did that so that that property wouldn't be split and that the residential wouldn't become a non-conforming lot. That's what it appears to me. So.
Mr. Craig?
Yes.
I have a question for Mr. Tim. On page 66, one thing that I got to hearing was VFW. Now, if that means that there possibly is going to be disability vans, things like that. On page 66, it shows a disability parking spot, but that is also in the driveway of the house. How does that work out? And how are they going to have a disability spot? According to ADA, they have to have one. How does that work out? How do they keep that spot?
Could I answer that for you? We have now restriped the front in front of the store, and the very first parking lot is handicap parking, and it does have enough room for if they have that door, that comes out the side. So there is one handicap parking lot. It's the first one facing Main Street.
That's an older site plan from 2000.
Right, but I mean, and that suffices though, the one, because now if we have one, then now we've knocked it down to 5 spaces, correct?
That'll be correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all, none of that is on-site parking. And in the downtown, the uses in the B2 zone don't have to have on-site parking, which means they don't have to have on-site barrier-free parking. This is one of those sites. So it's the same as if it was right next door to City Hall here, that you allow on-site parking for uses in the B2 zone. This is in the B2 zone.
We really don't have any idea how many cars or spaces are going to be needed, it sounds like, with 6 contracted therapists, and maybe more.
Mr. Johnson, did you have an opportunity to figure out that, how many parking spots are required per therapist?
Well, you have, I believe what Mrs. Papp said,
3.
6 at any one time, I think was the number she gave us. So if you need 3 for each staff, that's 18 right there.
Yeah.
No, I'm sorry, we only have one
Ma'am.
client, I'm sorry,
Hold on. We have a formula that,
I apologize.
yeah.
I mean, that's just a starting point. If this were an off-site use, and they had 6 professionals our ordinance says you need 3 spaces for each professional, well, that's 6 times 3 is 18. Right? And so if this was an off-site, if they had a big enough area and they were putting 6 counselors in there, they would need at least, excuse me, 18 off-street parking spaces. So they don't have that. They don't have any on-site parking spaces. But you have the authority by the ordinance to determine how many off-street parking spaces should be required. In 2009, the planning commission took a look at this and said, well, the furniture store only needed 4 off-street parking spaces. Guess what? There's 4 on the street. You can have those. You don't need any off-street parking spaces. Now we have use coming in that possibly might need 18, and you look at the site and say, there's no room for any on-site spaces. Could we use municipal parking spaces? Could we allow the people that come there to use the on-street parking? That's really the question you're being asked to answer.
Yes, sir.
As they submitted that they had a letter from the VFW that would allow them to park there, do we then need to look at the VFW and their parking needs, like to make sure that they do actually have the number of parking spaces to give them that they are saying that they have to give them?
Correct. They can't give away something that's required to have. So you would have to look at where they're taking the off-site parking from, the shared parking, and make sure that they're not cutting into their required parking spaces. So it's a very good observation. I have not seen that letter. I think it was just given to us this evening. So.
And also the Main Street Mall, that is typically has a lot of cars in it. So I don't think we have enough information to make a decision.
At the very least, I think the applicant should provide a map specifically identifying where each of these parking spaces is going to be. In addition to, I know Mr. Johnson's done the map, but we've not heard or we've not seen anything on paper from the applicant indicating I'm going to have 6 people, that requires 18 spots, and here are where my 18 spots are going to be. This is something we would require from any applicant who comes to this board. I don't know why this applicant should get a special treatment.
So, right, I concur that, you know, we don't really have, we don't have enough information to make a determination, because we need to see the writing of where those parking spots are gonna be.
And also because there's confusion about them wanting to split the lot that has come up again tonight.
But that's not our call to make. They applied for that and that was denied. That's not our decision. And then I guess the only other question that I had is the spots that are, I know this is an old map, but the spots that are marked in red as their on-street parking, unless I'm missing something, it looks like they're in the city right-of-way. And then they're also angled to the road, whereas all the other parking is parallel parking on the road, so.
Well, that gets really complicated quickly. So I'm looking at the Kent County Parcel Bureau map, and that, at least on the north side of the road, matches what the original 2009 site plan showed, which is 3 angled parking going like this on either side. I then have a more updated Google Maps version, which shows looks like 10 angled parking, but they're all angled towards the west. There's no separation for the driveway into the garage. And then there's an additional, looks like 3 parking spots in front of the, immediately in front of the residential building. You know, unless we all kind of march over there and see how they've got it painted today, because they've indicated they painted it a different way today, I don't think we know what the parking situation is over there. And the applicant has not submitted that information.
Will I answer that question?
Well, No, I think really that comes down to the lots that are in front, it's still not sufficient for, we need to have you submit to us where those spots, and there is a formula that tells you how many parking spots are required and the distance that they have to be, and so that's what you have to submit to us.
Yeah, because if they would run both directions, 3 here, 3 on the other side of the driveway, and then the driveway would be restriped. It has to be restriped.
So that's fine. That's 8, but you know, at a minimum, we have 18. So that's the plan that you have to submit to us before we can make that determination. So do we need to table this? Because I don't really see anything on here for us to
Well, you know, part of the
vote on.
difficulty here is I honestly don't know what the applicant has proposed. We're hearing, well, we're going to buy it, well, we're going to rent it, we're going to rent to buy it. We don't know what the parking spaces are, we don't know how many parking spaces are required. You know, this is stuff the applicant should be providing to the board. I know that the applicant likes to work with Mr. Johnson and myself to come up with some of this information instead of hiring their own planner. I get that. But at the very minimum, they do need to provide us information. And this is not, at least I don't think it's new stuff. Parking requirements are, you know, they've been around forever. They're obviously fully aware of it because they did it for the original site plan. Yeah, I'd like to know what their intentions are.
Is there somebody that you could recommend for them to work with to come up with that comprehensive checklist for us?
Well, so, and of course, the board gets this, and maybe members of the public don't, but Mr. Johnson works for the city. He's the city's planner. The applicant, and almost all applicants, hire their own independent planner, who will make these determinations and then submit that to the city and our planner to review. This applicant hasn't done that. Normally, I would work with the applicant to do that kind of thing, but the Truesdales have expressed their disinterest in doing so. So that's why I haven't worked with them on this project. So they can hire anybody. They could hire a friend of theirs to help them out. Somebody who has the knowledge and wherewithal to help put this kind of stuff together. Planning commission members know this. Maybe a former planning commission member can help them.
So, so I guess that, do you understand what we're looking for? We need to see we need to see a little bit more, we have a checklist that we're required by law to look at. We need to see your plan so that we can compare those, hold that up to the law. So you I'm sure that there's requirements all over the place. We have some on our website, but as Mr. Womack suggested, you probably should find somebody who is knowledgeable in zoning and planning, another planner, another planning commission member from maybe a different community that could help you.
I don't understand what's happening here.
All the information is are in the ordinances.
Right.
So it's easy to go to the website and find that information.
But we're not allowed to work with your city officials? Is that what am I hearing this correctly?
You need your own planner.
Right. It would be best if you just got your own planner to work with. Applicants that come before us, they come with a plan that has been prepared by a professional, and then our city planner looks at that plan and says, here's where it meets all of the zoning requirements, or here's where you have some leeway, here's some things that doesn't meet our ordinances. We don't have anything like that to compare right now.
For an applicant to use our planner, it's taxpayer dollars that are paying for it, where normally the applicant gets their own planner, and so they pay for it.
And I should point out that both myself previously in
Yes.
iterations of these plans, and the planner why maybe they need their own person to come in and help explain it, and have, you know, time outside the office, to really sit down and, you know, try to get a feeling for, are you buying the property, are you know, how many people are actually gonna work there, how many parking spots do you know, where are they gonna be at? Are the utilities actually separated or not? You know, it's fairly basic stuff, but they don't wanna work with me, and they should have their own planner.
Agree.
Well, at the very least, they need to put all this in writing. We need a better description of your intentions. At least a drawing of where your clinicians are going to park, and the agreement to share that parking, and how many parking spaces you are taking from them, and whether or not it meets the, we're taking parking away from what they are required to have. So it's just more information than what we have this evening, is what we're asking for. We've only heard it verbally. We need to have that in writing, as much as you can tell us.
So do we make a motion to deny at this point, or do we?
We don't have any
We don't.
proposal to approve or deny.
All right.
All right, so we'll just, we'll wait to hear back as that information comes in. All right, moving on to new business, item C, page 77 in your packet. Going to have some discussion regarding the repeal of a wood-burning ordinance. As Mr. Womack stated, I don't think we have any of these anymore, but
So, correct. This came about because there was one wood burner that I was aware of in the city. And the next door neighbor to that property came into City Hall and indicated that the person with the wood burner had recently moved out, and they were so very happy that the wood burner was gone. So when I came on board in 2016, and I reviewed the ordinances on the books at that time, this ordinance is one of those strange ones that kind of just sticks out at you like a sore thumb. There was no real reason for it, except for that this one person wanted to have a wood burner. And so at that time, due to whatever pressure, they passed a law allowing it. So now here we are 10, 15 years later. There are again no wood burners in the city, and I don't feel the same pressure, and I don't think the city council or this planning commission feels the same pressure from somebody who may want to have one of these things in the backyard. Now, I did originally take this to the city council to get their feeling for it, and they are the ones who've asked me to bring this to the planning commission for your input. I'm told, and of course I don't know this, but I'm told that the newer wood burners are significantly smaller, quieter, and less smoke making than the older ones, which this gentleman apparently had one of the older ones. So there was at least the thought that maybe these things could continue to be used in the city. But I've also had people indicate, well, if we're going to let it continue, maybe we need to take a new look at it, have setback requirements, maybe minimum lot sizes, other potential impositions that you could use in place of just simply banning them. So I bring it to this body for discussion.
well, I wouldn't be opposed to having that modified thing to look at and say, you know, what if they, you know, we have certain setbacks in size and certain amount of, I guess, efficiency, so that, you know, that is limiting the amount of smoke coming out, and then I don't know that we necessarily need to go all the way to just saying we're not having them at all.
I agree.
If they're more efficient, not necessarily a hazard, I don't see any problem with us having them, so long as, like he said, there are setbacks and limits to the size of them and where they can be as regard to like the street and other buildings.
And I think the problem with the other one that was in town was that the chimney stack never got as high as it was supposed to be. And so it really drove a lot of smoke down to the neighbors.
Well, and I think that may be part of the problem, that almost all houses have a natural gas burning furnace. Some people have an internal pellet stove. Some people have steam boilers. I'm not sure about here in the city. But those don't create the same smoke that this type of thing creates. It's not, those are all internal to the house, so they don't make the noise outdoors for you, the neighbors to hear it. I think the comment that stuck with me at council was, well, maybe these just aren't right for in the city. So, you know, I'm from the east side of state, maybe I've got a different idea about these things. But yeah, does anybody have any thoughts or comments about minimum lot sizes or appropriate setbacks? I mean, if your neighbor had one of these, how far from your house would you want it to be?
If you look at
Feet.
the neighborhood on Solon, I can't think of the name, Needlewood and all that over in there, the houses are so set together. I mean, you know what I'm saying? So you really wouldn't want to have them in there because they are just right on top of each other. But I think as long as you had enough of a partition between the houses, I think it would be fine, as long as you didn't have it where we have them on top of each other.
Well, and so you bring up a good point, and that is we have zoning districts. And in the city, the R1 zoning district has the largest side yard setback, and that is 10 feet. So theoretically, if you put it on the side of your house, now that is going to be potentially only 10 feet from your neighbor's house.
But the rules are, it has to be positioned 20 feet from each lot line and 100 feet from the primary structure on each adjacent lot. So that pretty well puts a lot of restrictions on it right there.
And frankly, I'm not sure if the wood burner that was present met those requirements.
I'm sure it didn't.
And I think it said it had to be in the backyard was the only place it said you could put it.
And that one wasn't because that was a side yard. But
I think if we follow these rules, I think it would be fine. I mean, they look pretty strict to me.
They do seem relatively limiting. There's a lot of properties in this town that could not comply with that.
A lot.
Might have been a case of a citizen put up a wood burner.
Yes.
And this law was passed to.
It was.
Okay, so
Yeah.
that's another part of this, is you guys have the history that I don't.
That was the case.
Well, so if you think this is sufficiently limiting,
I think so.
then maybe the appropriate action is to leave it as is. But I did want you guys to review the ordinance and see if there's anything that maybe needs to be modified.
Looks good.
Looks fine.
If there's no suggestions for modifications,
I think it looks good. Okay. All right, thank you. Item D, building design standards. Mr. Womack, you gave us kind of the general ones and then those a little bit more specific.
I looked through our ordinances to find any building design standards that were required under our ordinances. I was a little surprised to find that we had a fairly expensive one for the mixed-use district, which of course we are essentially gutting the mixed-use district here in the near future. So that simply won't apply much to that district, and even then, that district is fairly well built out. So that I don't anticipate having new buildings, especially new commercial buildings, being built in that district. So I also provided you with the non-residential design requirements. Those are fairly simplistic. Things such as you shall use materials that are high quality. Okay, we get it. That's pretty simplistic. But I guess the question is, should this board start working on design elements for places like the downtown? Should we have a requirement that 50% of all the storefronts in downtown be glass windows? Or something to that effect? In other words, do you want to, I guess, make this one of your work projects for the year? So that we could, I mean, the dental building that was approved, I I personally liked it, but I'm not sure that would meet with what a downtown design standard might dictate.
Yeah, but I don't know.
It's almost out of the downtown.
But I kind of like the flexibility of it being a little bit more general for us to be able to say, you know, this kind of fits the area that it's in, and not be so rigid. Or say, you know, well, everybody else, all these buildings, you know, you're going in right here in the middle, everything next to you has got 50% glass on the front. I think it's appropriate for you as well, you know. So I kind of like the general, the ones that give us some flexibility.
As long as it's aesthetic, like, doesn't contrast with everything aesthetically so much that everyone who goes by is like, why is that there? I mean, it doesn't bother me that we, like Craig said, have some flexibility in just deciding like, oh, it's here, does it look like it fits? And if it does, we're just like, oh, okay.
I'm curious, and maybe some people that have been on the board, or been on the commission here a little longer, we did something with a PUD under Mr. Amatini when he was here. Does that apply? Where is it? I remember we had many discussions about the 14-foot ceiling height and all the things that were part of that was applied to the downtown area. Did that evaporate? Did we never finish it? I'm just kind of curious where that sits.
The investigation that I did on the PUD was that the PUD law exists, but it never was actually applied to any districts. At least that was my understanding when I read it last. Because it needs to sick Mr. Johnson on the
I'd be happy to forget it ever happened, to be honest, but, because it seemed very contentious and didn't seem to fit very well in my personal opinion. But I just wanted to know if it was actually out there in the wild being, you know, should it be applied somewhere, or if it never did finish.
I looked at your PUD ordinance, and I can't figure it out.
Yeah.
Okay,
I can't
good.
figure out where it is.
Okay.
Put it in place, why it's here. I brought that up a year ago.
Yeah.
I would tend to agree. I don't know if there's anything we have to do with it to make it die or start over or whatever, but it
Well,
is.
I don't think we have to do anything to it. It was just, the idea was, I think, again, what we've just said was that trying to give us some flexibility within a certain framework for this up and down the Main Street area.
It was a Main Street.
Right, it
PUD.
was just supposed to be kind of like from, I think from Muskegon to
Muskegon.
Maple.
Yeah.
Right, and
B2.
theoretically, if that was an application, then we would have applied that to
Right.
to the dentist, but
Yeah.
that's why I was curious about it.
I wondered the same thing. Where'd it go?
So, Mr. Conley, having not read the PUD in a while, did it require 50% windows in the front of the building?
I don't remember the exact, but there was language like that. There was definitely language like that.
You know, yeah, we talked about 0 lot line in some spots.
It was a nightmare.
Yeah, because we wanted parking not on Main Street, but behind the building, and
It's one of those kind of things when you have a change of administration and different people coming in, that they get sometimes lost in the middle of the process. So, if it's not something that we have to heed, then good enough.
So, does the board not think that we need to have more specificity in the design requirements moving forward?
My only concern with that, and I'm sorry if I'm stepping out of turn, I should ask for permission first. My only concern with that is I love to be flexible, but I don't know when to stop being flexible if we don't have some kind of basic guidelines.
Right.
So, Mr. Johnson, correct me if I'm wrong on this. Somebody proposes the most awfully ugly building you've ever seen in your entire life. Something that is as gaudy as the day is long. And they bring it to you and you all say, man, that is ugly and gaudy. And then you say, well, you know, we don't actually have any ability to say no to that.
Exactly.
So subjective is ugly and gaudy. How do we do
My
that?
subjective is what matters now.
Oh, yeah. You're from the east side.
windows on the front of the building.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't know a single person in this room who thought that wasn't good.
No.
So that's kind of what I'm angling for.
Right.
Is I think you can make those certain requirements, and maybe even flexible requirements.
I think minimums, but then some flexibility for this body with that. Like, I like the way Mr. Connolly said that, you know, we can be flexible, but then we know the spot where we have to stop being flexible.
And I think talking about the gun and the roundup, I don't think having windows in the front would have benefited any of us. So I think it was just fine not having any windows in the front.
Well, your, a lot of your building facade regulations are difficult to write in any zoning ordinance. I've taken my hand at writing them, and some of them are measurable, such as 50%, have to be a certain material. And the thrust of your regulations are, does it fit? And I'll know when I see it. And so you have to be somewhat cautious there that if you disallow something because you think it subjectively doesn't meet your big standards, how do you uphold that in court? That's the difficult. So you have to build a pretty good record if you're going to turn down somebody's new building with materials or colors that you don't think fit. You've got to build a good record when you do something, you deny something. That's my only caution there.
So if we go to try and set minimal standards, and I'm pretty new at this, so I'm just curious, where do you start deciding what those minimum standards are? Where do you start figuring that out?
Well, you start with what do we have downtown now? What do we like? And what do we want to see? Do we want to see something very similar to that? So that's how you build your standards. And you have it in a net. You have words like harmonious with the surrounding area, roof lines that fit, materials that fit. Okay, if somebody comes in with a pole barn and the material, it doesn't fit. So you say, it doesn't fit for these reasons. So it all starts with what do you have, what do we like, what do we want to keep?
It's kind of like theming for the downtown, too. I think I mentioned Gaylord last time, where if you go through Gaylord, they call themselves the Alpine capital of Michigan, because everything looks like you're in Switzerland or Munich. I know the city of Grand Rapids requires that they have the installation of a bicycle rack or a bench out in front of the building. That's a requirement of their site plans. I know Greenville's got them too. I can't articulate what they are, but I think it was the mayor who indicated at some point Cedar Springs was western themed, and that everybody had a elevated walkway in front of the building, which the Roundup still has. So you can impose things like that to create a theme for your downtown. Now, again, I'm okay with keeping things funky just to keep things funky. But, this board should be considering these things and whether they think it's a good standard for the future.
I think the Redbird is beautiful. They did a nice job.
So, copy the Redbird. Is that
No.
Now, and again, as you guys know, the library and the fire station are taking design cues off of each other. Those things have been kind of harmoniously designed architecturally to look like each other.
Okay.
So, that's kind of where the municipality's going.
Then you can come back with something that you like or think we'll like. I don't know, have you looked at, Mr. Johnson, have you looked at the design standards?
Yes, I looked at them when we were reviewing the dental
Oh,
office.
yeah.
And, that was my opinion, the roof line didn't fit. But that's a subjective opinion.
I don't know how many things, well, I do know, I'm sure we still have a lot on our work schedule.
Yeah.
So would we agree that this at least belongs on the schedule?
Yes.
Maybe
Yes.
don't know the priority of it, but that it at least belongs on the schedule?
For sure. Okay.
There was a lot of talking for giving ourselves homework.
Right.
Yeah.
It's an important topic, so.
You give us homework, so. All right, old business, we're returning to the site plan at 4288 17 Mile Road for O'Reilly. And you have a memo from Mr. Johnson dated February 25th, 2020. And it appears for the most part we're pretty close. There's just a couple things that we need to still just finalize here. So, Mr. Johnson, you want to just walk us through those last couple pieces that we need to give input on?
All right, we have a site plan dated February 24th, 2020 that is sealed. For that date, they've also given us a landscape plan dated February 19th, the photometric plan sealed and dated 2/25/20, and building elevation drawings, and those are all in response to our previous staff reports and planning commission comments. Happy to report that all the items that we've asked for have been provided. Some things that I would point out that we had a recommendation that the sidewalk cross the driveway at a point further away from the right-of-way line. The applicant has moved that down there. I think that's a little safer place for people to cross. Regarding the sidewalks, a portion of the sidewalk is outside the public right-of-way, so we will need a sidewalk easement to allow for public use of that. That should be provided as part of site plan review, and I would recommend it be provided before an occupancy permit is issued. Driveways and access, they have shown on their site plan a 24-foot wide access lane across the front of their property and through their parking lot that extends to the adjacent property lines. They have not paved it all the way to the property lines. On the west side, there's some topographical issues that have prevented them at this point in time from paving to that property line. And then on the east side, that's quite a stretch to get from the driveway to the east property line. But one of the conditions would be that they sign an agreement with the city to construct the access aisle to the property line at such time that the adjacent property comes in for site plan review by the Planning Commission. And the Planning Commission at that time can require from the new applicant to pave to their property line, and then the agreement would kick in to have O'Reilly's finish the paving on their side, thereby completing the access lane across the front of the property. So those are two agreements that we would ask them to provide. One of the other points that we need your approval on is the height of the parking lot light poles. In our zoning ordinance, in a commercial zone, the height of the light pole can be up to 30 feet if the poles are more than 150 feet from a residential use or zone, which they would be in this case. So they're providing parking lot lights that are 27.5 feet tall. So we would need your approval to approve that height because there's no houses or residential zones beyond that. So that would be something you could approve. Yes?
Isn't there a house right next to this, between this and the bank?
It used to be. It's not there anymore.
The one behind the bank is gone?
There was one to the west, but I don't believe it's there anymore. And then our engineer has provided a letter that is in your packet regarding the detention basin and water runoff from the parking lot to that detention basin. It would infiltrate into the sand, thereby not reaching the creek. There may be periods of time when if the water during a rain event reaches a certain height, it would drain off into the overflow into the creek, but that would only be during large rain events. Most of the time, it's going to just drain into the detention basin and infiltrate into the soil. So I know there was some concern about contaminants reaching the creek. I would say most of the time that would not happen. And they would also need approval to construct that detention basin that close to the creek from the state. So I provided you with a motion for approval. That would include the parcel being brought into the city of Cedar Springs via the Development Cooperation Agreement with Solon Township, and also meeting the requirements of the city engineer.
Do we need in there too the approval from the state for the detention pond?
You can add that. That's the number one there says requirements with the city engineer. The engineer's letter requires that, but you can add that for the record, sure. That'd be fine. We do have a representative from O'Reilly's here tonight.
Right.
We do have a representative from O'Reilly's here tonight, all the way from Texas. He said He said he's very glad to be in Michigan because he enjoys the weather here, the cold weather.
So I'm sure you got a copy of that memo that Mr. Johnson just shared with us? And so those easement agreements and that sort of thing, are those an issue for you, or?
The only thing that we really have an issue with is the front cross access. We're more than happy to grant that access and a construction easement, but O'Reilly is not going to construct that road. If someone moves in next door, they're more than welcome to connect into our drive, because it would benefit them. But for O'Reilly to construct that drive over does not benefit them at all. It actually is it just increases the rent and construction costs. So we would ask that you allow us to give you an easement, give you a construction easement where they're allowed to go and build on our property at any time. And if there ever is someone who moves in next door.
And I would only take, I don't want to say offense, but I would state that, yeah, to a certain extent it benefits the next door neighbors, but ultimately it's the public that benefits from being able to cross between all these properties. I can understand their hesitance to want to extend to the east side because that's a significant distance. But I also, at least I'm of the opinion that property is very unlikely to redevelop. To the west is, I think, the more important distance. Do you know how far from the property line you are between where you plan on constructing and how far the property line is?
I don't know off the top of my head.
It's only 10 feet. Requiring them to,
it's not very far at all.
yeah, I mean, requiring them to do 10 extra feet or requiring the new, property to do 10 extra feet. I guess I don't personally care. I just don't like the idea of letting them off the hook because they're saying, well, it's just the neighbors who are gonna benefit. We don't benefit from all. Well, yeah, their customers are going to benefit from it as well. But it's only 10 feet, so.
Let me add to that, and that is, if we're trying to reduce driveway access across there, then if you recall, O'Reilly's was given the right to put their driveway where they were, basically, rather than on the shared property line at the west, because we want their driveway to provide access to the property that develops to the west, because they're not likely to get their own driveway cut. And we're building a frontage road across the front there, and if O'Reilly's does not want to construct the remaining 10 feet to the west property line, because they have certain topographical issues which are kind of iffy in my opinion, and we wait till the adjoining property develops, I don't think it's fair to the adjoining property owner to tell them, oh, by the way, you have to build your access road on O'Reilly's property. O'Reilly should build it on their own property. And to construct 10 feet of asphalt is not a huge amount of money. I feel that we could probably concede that as long as we didn't have to build the other side.
So going to the west, that 10 feet you're good with?
Anytime.
At the very minimum, they should provide the construction easement to the east.
Sure,
I
yeah,
can
that's,
understand their hesitance there. I just don't know if that property owner is ever gonna redevelop.
Right.
Now, they were here at the last meeting, and he's here at this meeting, so you may wanna hear from him as well, although he is not the property owner, whether they have any interest in doing that, because that's gonna be a significant cost. But I think I would make the argument, not on applicant's behalf, but that one is much more likely to strictly benefit the property owner to the east versus, as Mr. Johnson was indicating, the requirement that the property to the west be using a shared driveway. But this is a policy decision for planning.
I agree. The one to the west does make sense to do, so we'd be happy to do so. 10 feet is not. That's not a big deal.
right. So, Mr. Johnson, then in your proposed motion, then is that number 4 that we need to modify?
We can modify that to say they will construct the access lane to the property line and allow for a connection. They can construct it now, that's better than constructing it later. for that sound issue? Yeah.
So to say that they, instead of shall record an agreement with the city to construct parking lane access.
No, they'd have to give us a new site plan showing that it's gonna be constructed to
Right.
that property line. We could do that, contingent upon, that's, yeah, that'd be a condition of approval, that they provide a revised, at least one, that sheet of the site plan to show construction of the, access lane to their west property line. And then to record and then agree to, allow for a connection, when the property to the west develops. And to keep it open. I've been in communities where they pave it and then they block it. And if you don't put that in there, they can block it.
Okay, so we'll do the applicant shall record an agreement with the city to allow access to, just to the west, are we gonna say that?
Yeah, to construct the access lane to the west property line. They actually physically construct it.
But not construct it to the east.
So then we just strike the rest of that. Right, the applicant shall record an agreement with the city to construct access lane to the west.
Yeah, but I think you wanna leave open the door that,
Right.
that they shall maintain the easement,
Right.
on the west, or to the east. That's on the site plan.
Right. And then, we can add another point there about, contingent on their site plan showing that.
Right.
And then the other question that Mr. Johnson had for us was about the height of the pole lights, 27.5 feet. Is that
See a
acceptable
problem?
to everybody?
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Can you read that paragraph to us?
Yeah, well, I'm gonna try to make sense of it. So, Ms. Johnson, you have Mr. Johnson's thing. Okay, so I think that we're going to do, as his, I will make the motion that we follow Mr. Johnson's motion, as set forth in his memo there, with points 1, 2, 3 being unaltered. And then 4, the applicant shall agree to construct and keep open the access lane to the west property line and maintain an easement to the east property line. Okay. Then that second paragraph under number 4, we should keep that, right? To ensure that this connection can be implemented when the adjacent parcel develops. The actual vehicle connection. Right. So we need to leave that part there. And then 5 and 6 are as is. 7 is subject to approval from Eagle for the detention pond. And then point 8 would be the site plan. This is approval of this is contingent on the site plan showing that the driveway does go all the way to the west property line. That they present a new site plan that shows that the driveway goes all the way to the west property line. Okay? That's my motion.
I'll second that. Oh.
Any discussion on that?
I'm thinking of asking you to read it all again, but.
I got it now.
But for the record, but maybe not, I'm okay.
Okay. All in favor of approving that motion for that site plan, aye? Aye. All opposed, no? Okay, motion carries. Thank you. Thank you. All right. White Pine Trail overview, or overlay, we had talked about last month, maybe just using the B2 permitted uses as sort of a starting point to talk about the kind of things that we want, and then maybe go through and strike some of the things out of there. When I looked at the special land uses, I just kind of put an X through that whole thing. I don't really see anything in the special land uses that I think are gonna be in B2 currently that would
Really?
be appropriate on a
Really?
Oh, I found lots of stuff.
I did too.
drive-through facilities, community centers, churches.
Bowling alleys, skating rinks, rock climbing, pool and billiard halls, pinball sports.
I'm looking at special land uses.
That's what I,
40294.
This one? Yeah, so,
Yours looks different than mine. No, I guess this.
so I mean, parking lots,
Oh, you know what? Actually, D is the one that I did leave, sorry. The indoor recreation facilities. But the other ones,
I agree. Most of the other ones don't really cater to
gas station, hotel,
biker.
childcare, daycare, adult foster care.
it wasn't that long ago for E, we were thinking of putting a community center right in that spot, so we're not going to because it doesn't fit now, but that's,
Yeah, I thought we were thinking more along the lines of what would cater or fit people going up and down the trail.
Recreational users.
So,
And the property that the community center was gonna go on is currently B3.
how far will this overlay extend? It'll stop prior to that, right?
I believe so. But this is simply adding additional things on
Right.
to it.
Right.
yeah, we're just looking at like an overlay on that White Pine Trail.
And I think this is mostly geared towards the properties that are industrially zoned, whereas adding the B2 designation, anything that's B3 is pointless, because B3 includes all B2 designations.
Yes, yeah, that's true. I think I just approached this from the point of view of what could I possibly I think we looked at it from two different directions. That I went, okay, what could theoretically work there versus
that's what I did.
what we shouldn't have there.
Yeah.
But none of this is set in stone. I just kind of went through it real quick.
I had restaurants, coffee shops, bakeries, ice cream, allow walk-up window service, outdoor dining, maybe bicycle repair, sales, souvenir shops, clothing and dry goods. Anybody have anything else?
Well, like I said, I went through the B2 and kind of took out, so I mean, I took out like banks and credit unions.
Yeah.
I think we wanted those offices and showrooms of plumbers, electricians,
Farmers market.
commercial schools.
Farmers market.
Dude,
I don't know.
Well, I think farmer market might fit, like.
Maybe. I mean,
I think
maybe.
it'd be
but-
perfect.
Rockford's got the farmer's market right off the trail.
yeah, that
Which is
seemed,
kinda
that
nice.
seemed tailor-made for that kind of thing, to be honest.
Right?
Medical, optical, dental, veterinary, I don't know.
Should we start at the beginning and, or, I'm sure you're all taking notes on this, but should we start at the beginning and just see which are points of contention or which ones we can easily just blow by?
Sure. All right, so, I will start here. Do you have that list of okay, so I'll just start on this, 4293, the permitted uses. Letter A, just if anybody has an issue with this being in that White Pine Trail overlay, then just speak up. So A, retail businesses that supply commodities on the premises. B, personal services.
What, you want us to shout out what we don't want on there?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah, if you got a problem with it, speak up.
do you want liquor on the White Pine Trail?
Rather have it there than close to the road.
Okay. Appliances,
Oh, we could take that part out. I'm just,
hardware?
there's generally recognized retail businesses, so, just.
Okay, what is our purpose? To draw people from the trail to these businesses, right? Do you think they're gonna be looking for furniture?
Probably not.
So are we going through and crossing out the ones that we
Well,
don't?
I think what Mr. Womack said last time was, instead of just us starting from scratch and going, what are all of the things we think would be on the trail, just start with a list.
Yeah.
And so he proposed the B2 and say, are these the things that we would want on this trail? So we can certainly add to it. We're just, or, you know, we could throw this out and we can just take a blank piece of paper and just start going through the things that we think that we want on the White Pine
That
Trail.
might be easier.
If it helps, I generally agreed with A, but I crossed out appliances and furniture, because we're not selling appliances and furniture off the White Pine Trail, most likely. But however we wanna do it, I don't care.
Right.
What's the rest of the guys think?
I think we do also need to remember that, we are limiting it, but at the same time, we're not 100% deciding what we think would be a good business model there, just whether or not we want it to be right there.
So do you wanna go through a list that already exists and take things out and modify things? Or do you wanna just turn it over and go with a blank piece of paper and just start listing all the things that we want on the White Pine Trail?
If we could just jump over A, because it had some contention, I think there's a lot here we can just zero out and get off the list.
Okay.
And then this list will look a lot easier to deal with.
Okay.
If it's contentious at all, we can skip it and come back to it, but if we just focus first on what we can get rid of, that'll make our list smaller. Does that work for you, Kathy?
Oh, sure. Well, in B, repair shops, that could be a bicycle repair. So just circle that one.
So, but wait, let's go back to A. So we said that we're taking out
Furniture?
furniture and appliances and hardware. Okay. Personal services. There are things that you want to take out on there?
Hair and nail salons. Kind of those fumes and stuff going back to the White Pine Trail. Nobody really wants to smell that back there.
Is anyone really gonna put a tailor shop or print shop or?
Be weird, but.
Well, and I don't know if those benefit anybody up and down the trail either.
Well, that was it, yeah.
When I thought about the trail, I was literally thinking about like the dam in Rockford, where they have ice cream and hot dogs and stuff. But I'm a big boy, so I like that.
They do have some variety down there at the dams as well.
Yeah.
I mean, there's.
Just clothing stores? and-
Yeah.
Right. So let's just,
Most of it in B, I don't see.
Yeah, I don't think, except for repair shops for like bikes or something, I don't think anything else in B we really need next to the trail.
I agree.
so just what, say bike repair shop? You want to be specific?
Yeah.
Well, also snowmobile.
Okay.
That
yeah.
does come on the list later. But during the winter, there's other types of repair.
Yeah,
that could
that's
be.
true.
That's a much bigger.
Well, it's actually, we're gonna get to that. It's in the special land use, so we need to decide when we get there if we would take that or not. But could be a ski shop, could be for cross countries, it could be lots of stuff through there. Depending on what
So we
season
leave
they're in.
repair shops in there, just repair shops.
Just repair shops.
Okay.
And, yep, right.
I could see a photographic studio working out of there, though. There's a lot of.
Oh, that might, yeah,
Sure.
that might not be too bad.
Okay, so repair shops, photograph studios. All right. C, professional business offices.
Doesn't really benefit. the
No,
town.
I don't think so.
no,
D, banks, credit unions.
no.
Probably not.
Health, fitness establishments, martial arts, boxing schools,
No.
offices, showrooms.
Definitely need plumbers on the White Pine Trail.
Plumber crack.
Commercial schools,
No.
okay. Restaurants, coffee shop, bakeries, taverns, I think.
More of those things I
Yes.
could see there, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could just point know a lot of these are industrially zoned properties where plumbers are a permitted use.
Well, if they're already there.
Well, that's what I'm saying though, is they could go there under the industrial zoning designation.
Okay.
Of course.
But we're talking about adding, things that would be better suited,
Right.
that would not otherwise be permitted in the industrial section.
Right,
This
right.
is
So
the
it-
overlay.
It'd be, I mean, it would be redundant. We're in the mindset of the overlay at the moment. It's true, absolutely. And
I don't
right now,
think-
there's a lighting business there as well. And we wouldn't elect to put that in an overlay, but it's already there.
I don't think it's the plumbers, themselves that, like their services that we are saying no to, it's their dress. There we go.
All right, brew pubs?
Wait, what happened
No.
to H?
Well, I think we said.
Isn't that restaurant?
Yeah.
That was the restaurant
Okay.
stuff.
I'm okay with brew pubs being there. I mean, that seems like an activity that people.
And that's, yeah, because I mean, people, I know, get on the trail all the time and bike up to like Cedar Springs Brewing.
They do like a Rockford to Cedar Springs
Right.
ride all the time.
Okay.
That's in there, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Farmers market,
Yes.
medical, optical, dental,
No.
government offices,
No.
public institutions.
Can't stop them.
Well, I mean, I could see there being some kind of a need to have that at some point. Like if you wanted to put up some kind of like a Cedar Springs museum there, or
Maybe an amphitheater.
like I mean, we already have the amphitheater that was just built, but something similar to that, some kind of a public area for that. I could see that being potentially there.
Mr. Womack, is that already allowed in the industrial area? No, okay. Mr. Johnson says no.
Well, I mean, technically, I don't think these rules apply to the government anyways.
We're on to N.
Okay, catering,
If they have free samples. Oh,
I'd say no to catering. I'm looking for more.
That's not open to the public generally.
Yeah.
yeah.
video gaming establishments.
Yes.
Really?
Like an arcade?
I'd say yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Dude, like an arcade right on the trail, that'd be awesome.
Oh, there'd
For
be
sure.
tons of people stopping
I
for
hear
that.
there was one just open in Rockford.
Ooh.
Into it.
No.
No.
Maybe that's a weekend assignment, so you can decide whether it would work for us.
I,
So that's a question
How many
mark?
tokens are you gonna get, Mr. Womack?
Letter P, do we want any dwelling units?
no.
No.
Okay. Q, outdoor display of merchandise.
Yeah,
Yeah,
like,
that,
because artists might want to display their art or something.
Or if people are zipping by on the trail, even just past a shop, they might not look at the name, but they might see something sitting outside.
yeah.
I think that R really isn't, there isn't any single-family dwellings, I think, in that thing that would be converted, right? I don't think that there's anything there, so it doesn't really apply. But, S, municipal parking lots.
No.
We don't want a parking lot on the trail, do we?
Not so much.
I mean,
You guys all like the stage?
Well, I was gonna say, other than
Yeah.
the staging area,
Yeah.
it's already.
Well, yeah.
I mean, what if we've ever felt we needed to have more parking there as we expanded? A la the staging area, that was the other only, but, or are we already covered in other ways for that?
And as you can imagine, first of all, you guys are the government, so, you know, you can help make these decisions, but, the government's not exactly eager to take a otherwise productive area of land and turn it into parking.
True.
It's not something we're eager to do, we'd rather have business.
Mhm.
So my preference would be to keep it. Of course, we're gonna do what we want anyways, but, yeah, my preference would be to keep it and trust that the government's gonna do the right thing.
so keep parking lots there.
Yeah.
Okay. Fraternal, social club, lodge,
No.
incubator facilities.
No.
Parks, public, open spaces, swimming pools, community building.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Accessory uses and structures.
That's one of those things where if you're gonna have a business, you might wanna have a shed out back, put
Oh.
whatever in it.
Okay.
Okay, so.
Yeah, I'd be okay with
Yeah.
that.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So then special land use, those were the permitted uses, and they don't, I mean, again, because we're doing this overlay, all the things we pick, we could say we think that all of them should be permitted uses, or we could have some special land uses. This is just a part of that same thing. So, drive-through facilities,
No.
probably don't want that there. Non-residential plain unit developments,
No.
private parking lots,
No.
No.
indoor commercial recreation,
Yes.
theater,
Yeah.
bar,
Yeah,
high
that
school
I could
events.
see.
Yeah.
Community centers, operated
Yes.
Yes.
by a public or nonprofit agency. Okay. Churches,
I think we have to say yes, don't we? I thought that was one of those we had to.
They're allowed in any other zoning districts.
Okay.
So no.
It's not like
Yeah.
you're zoning them out.
municipal buildings, utility buildings, regulating substations, pressure control stations.
Again, this is one of those, yeah,
Yeah, that's kind of going to happen no matter what.
Dictated by the land itself.
Right, so just leave it under, especially like under special land use. Public garages and automobile repair,
Not on the trail.
Yeah, it's not really.
hotel motel,
No.
gas station.
No.
Okay, do we want to separate it and have convenience store be a separate thing?
That'd be covered under, retail use.
Retail, okay. Okay, so, repair of small engines, appliances, similar equipment.
Well, so again, this comes back to that's generally permitted in the industrial section. And frankly, I don't know about you guys, they never look that nice. They're
Mm-mm.
laying things out in the yard. They kind of look a little junky to me, and I don't think we want to promote junky looking businesses along the trail.
So what are we saying? I mean, like, I'm not gonna say the name, but if we have a business that does this next to the trail, if they decide to close the doors, we just don't allow another one in on that spot?
Well, that's the problem though, because I think almost all these properties that we're talking about are going to be rezoned industrial. So we may have to go back to industrial and see whether those are permitted use or special land use.
Okay.
Okay, repair of motorcycles, snowmobiles, ATVs, boats. We don't have to have that whole list, but, like,
The snowmobiles I could
Snowmobiles
see.
probably, yeah. And all-terrain vehicles.
Yeah.
probably not gonna have ATVs on the trail.
Not
right?
so
Those aren't
much.
allowed.
Right,
Not
and
so,
so,
yeah.
so we could just limit it to snowmobiles.
And boats, I mean, you're taking your boat out.
Bike your boat up the trail.
Really, snowmobiles, you think?
I don't care one way or the other. I'm not a snowmobile person myself. I just know there's always snowmobiles going up and down the trail. I don't know if it's advantageous to have a place to repair them.
I think the problem with that is the fact that snowmobiles can only start at Russell Road, which is 3 miles south of the city.
Yeah.
I strongly doubt that you're gonna get 3 miles away from your car and say, you know what, I'm gonna stop here and get repairs.
Probably true. It's probably not worth
Okay.
the hassle.
Right? Residential uses, again, I don't know that really
No.
fits, because they're not gonna have Main Street access anyhow. Production of merchandise on the premises.
I think that seems fine as a special land use, depending on what they're doing there, that might be allowable.
Well, and what it says too, that it's not detrimental by odor or anything, that's.
Right.
Yeah, that keeps
Yeah.
them from.
If they're making little souvenirs or something in there, I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I think just leave it as a special land use so that we can kind of decide on a
Somebody's
case-by-case
making pottery.
basis.
And then childcare, daycare, and adult foster care,
No.
not allowed on the trail.
No.
All right? So we gave you some more homework.
Okay, we can do something with this now. You gave us some good feedback at the last meeting too, that we can come back with an ordinance. Next meeting.
All right. That concludes the old business. correspondence, you got a whole lot of reports in your packet. I hope you had a chance to do those. So, Rebecca, you got anything else? Any other correspondence? Okay. Ms. Romack, anything for us? Okay. Ms. Johnson, anything? Planning Commission members, any comments from you to share? I'll just
ask Mr. Tim a question about, something about a site plan.
Sure.
For the, because I missed last meeting, for the site plan at the O'Reilly's, did y'all take into effect what was gonna be on the ground, on the parking lot, and take into effect where that's going to be draining to and all that?
Yes.
Yeah, it's basically the water is sheet draining from the parking lot to the detention basin.
Right, and then that said something about release, mandated release or something, I don't know what I read on the pond. So I was seeing, so all that, the antifreeze oil and stuff just goes into the ground?
That's the theory, yes.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Well, I'll just say thanks again for all of your input tonight. I mean, we had some difficult topics to discuss, and so I appreciate your input on that. It was very helpful. We do not have a city council representative with us tonight, so we'll skip 12. Mr. Johnson, you got anything else for us? Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, and support? All right, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. We are adjourned.
Don't tumble.
I had to grab that chair, I was like, whoa! Stood up too fast, my legs were like, not ready for that.
I thought you were young again.
Woo, right?
All day.
It wasn't almost 40.
I didn't have any time to I really didn't have any downtime to not be moving around before I came here.
Yeah.
And then I just sat for an hour, 45 minutes.
Legs gotta be dead. I'm going to the workshop tomorrow. Hopefully learn.
Oh, the planning one?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I found that super helpful when I went.
I'm still trying to learn